James, you were mentioning you had a computer science degree, James Altucher, and I don't, but I've been around computers. I did everything from running an entire product support team to doing release engineering technology for a very long time. And it just took us 22 minutes to make this work because you have a new computer and my computer, evidently Skype wanted to update the software but didn't think to tell me that's what it was trying to do. And so it just choked all over me. This is
This is a basic problem. Like, computers don't work yet. Like, it's about, what is it, 30 years in for personal computers, and they don't quite work. We're like in inning 3 or 4 still.
Feels that way. And you know, it's a little baffling. You know, for instance, I was telling people online today, I said, I'm really frustrated that Instagram hasn't launched yet for Windows. And I said, I thought there was something new coming. And they said, oh yeah, it has launched for Windows. It's only for Windows Phone. And if you're a Nokia user, you can use it. But then otherwise you have to go find a beta. But if you're using the tablet, which is still technically a mobile operating system, you're out of luck, sorry. And I was just like, really? This is really where we are with this still? There's still multiple versions of things. This isn't the world that we need right now.
No, it's going to change, though. It gets better. That's the good thing. It always gets better.
That is. I mean, you know, it's funny. Until that very moment, I've had nothing but good things to say about my experience on the Windows platform, on the new system. I feel like, you know, people who hate on it really just haven't tried it even. They're just doing it because it's in vogue to say mean things about Microsoft right now. But, you know, I think we're in a world where the technology is starting to try to feel more transparent. It's just bumps in the road sometimes, I guess, that make that true.
Yeah, yeah.
James, what are you working on these days? What's kind of new? What's got you excited? What are you getting ready to do next and soon or whatever?
Well, yesterday I just handed in my latest book. It's called The Power of No, and it's the first one I am co-authoring with my wife, Claudia. So that's exciting. And it actually turned out to be a much more difficult process than I thought it would be. Not the writing, but the actual doing something difficult with my wife. You know, communicating on a different level than we're normally communicating on is actually a hard thing.
You know, there's a lot to that because, I mean, there's a world of difference between, hey, did you feel like going and checking out that new restaurant tonight versus, well, I don't think the chapter should go this way, and here's why.
Yeah, because then, you know, it gets to all of your fears, all your anxieties, you know, on both sides, not just me, not just with her, but of course, out of, in the heat of battle is where you find your courage. So not that we were battling, but that is where we found our courage to kind of continue and finish the book. And it's a great product, and we're really happy with it. So we're excited for it.
Well, I mean, we shouldn't promote it that too much yet because it's going to come out in a while or something. But
yeah, June.
Next June.
Yeah.
But what an important topic. I mean, no is really one of the biggest problems that most people have, isn't it?
Every single day. I mean, every single day it comes up. I'm sure for you, a lot of people say, Chris, can I have just 5 minutes of your time? I won't bother you at all. You know it's not going to be 5 minutes. It's going to be a half hour, and it's going to be about something that's not really going to be what you're interested in working on for the day. Like, you have your own goals and priorities for the day. So, you know, no happens all the time. I'm just thinking of an example off the top of my head, but there's a billion examples.
Absolutely. And so I was just finishing a book called Executive Toughness, and it's by a guy who did mental toughness training, for instance, with the St. Louis Cardinals. He supposedly is a great part of why they actually won the World Series in 2006 against the Tigers. And you know, now, of course, he made it a business book because there's no money in selling sports books. And so he's put these lessons to business people. And in there, I mean, one of the 3 things he says really push executive toughness are accountability, focus, and optimism. And so under the focus one was, of course, saying no. And I thought, absolutely. I mean, every mistake I've made as an entrepreneur is thinking I could do more than I could.
Well, and it's not only as an entrepreneur, but even like as a person. How many times do you say, oh gosh, I really don't want to go to my cousin's for Thanksgiving, but it's the whole family, you're supposed to do that, and then you just have a miserable time. It's your 4 days of vacation and it's miserable. Like, and just, we spend half our life in misery because we've said yes to the wrong things. You know, and it's, again, It's related to our art. It's related to our work. It's related to our relationships. So no is it's related to our own time that we spend too. Like we might say yes to watching the wrong shows, eating the wrong food, or we might say yes to these things, and avoid spending the time we could in silence or building our creativity or whatever it is to improve our productivity.
I wrote a post fairly recently, wherein which I said, so I said something, slightingly towards Game of Thrones. I did it on purpose because I knew some people would probably complain, and sure enough, they did. And I basically said, I said we sort of over-report our need for downtime. And we tend to like to fill it with things like serial watching of TV series or whatever. And I sort of challenged to say, is that really what we want to do with our lives? And a few people said, I think it's great to have something like a show to watch. And it's not a fight I wanted to have. But at the same time, I think that also relates to the no thing, because as you point out, people fill up their time with absolutely not important things.
Yeah, well, think about the times. I mean, relationships is a big one. Like, think about the times where, I'm just speaking for myself, where I thought this is the one. If only she would be like A, B, and C, then she'd be perfect for me. So I'm going to put in all this time trying to make her like A, B, and C, and I'm going to put my life on hold for a year while she becomes the perfect person for me, and I completely ignore my own needs, and it's a year out of my life. Now, of course, again, from every challenge, you learn from yourself, you learn for yourself, and you grow, and so on. But there are so many things where it would be simply better to do nothing than to do something. We're in a culture right now where all the time it's like you have to do something, you have to do something, you have to. There's the whole self-help industry. Do the to-do lists and make sure you're active first thing in the morning. Sometimes, though, there are many, many cases where it's just good to do nothing, and relationships is often one of them.
I want to totally jump tracks because this blew my mind. I forget sometimes that I have access to people like yourself that others find, as amazing stars. And that's how I think of you. I just forget that because that's how we talk. I mean, we just talk like friends, and I forget that you also are a guy who founded a lot of companies and all this. Your Reddit AMA thing, it was astounding to me. And basically,
thanks for. I didn't even know you saw it. It was interesting, and I'm sorry for interrupting, but somebody asked a question and I answered it, and I said, okay, I'll answer some questions here. It was like a sub thread of an AMA, and then my sub thread ended up having over 2,000 comments and 3,000 votes, and I ended up doing 8 hours of Q&A on Sunday.
And I watched it roll by, and I was so mind blown. I was really just blown away by what people said, how they responded, what kinds of things they asked, the craziness of Reddit. Like, I always forget that, it is a full spectrum experience there. What did you, besides taking all that time and investing it, what did you feel about it all? What did you feel like you got out of the investment of that time? And what was the surprise, if anything?
I don't know. I mean, I get a lot of satisfaction actually out of doing these Q&As. But what I really see is that people need help. Okay, they grow up and all they're taught is plan A. And plan A is, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to get a job, things are going to go from success to success and better to better. And at some point, I'm going to retire earlier than most people, and then I'm going to enjoy the rest of my life. Well, that's plan A. They don't have a plan B. There is no plan B for basically the enormous middle class, which is about 6 billion people, give or take a couple of billion. So there's no plan B. And I think people suffer and suffer in a way that's very deep. Like, there's no spiritual plan B. And I don't mean this in a religious way. It's not like people have to go to church and pray, but there's no sense that people take a step back to be grateful for what they have, that they appreciate the abundance already in their lives. There's no sense that people should be with that, everybody's focused on work, money, success, and then have fun. But as human beings, though, we're actually constituencies of a lot of things. There's the kind of work side and mastery side, then there's the love side, and there's kind of the emotional side, spiritual side. But people are focused on only one side, and we become very unbalanced. And I see that in these Q&As that as a society, and there's people all over the world asking these questions, as a society around the world, we're desperately unhappy and looking for essentially the same answers. We're the same species, and we're looking for the same answers right now, which is what can I do if nobody's giving me a lot of money? And suddenly every myth I've ever had has fallen apart. Every belief system has fallen apart. What do I do now? I don't have a plan B. And that's what I realize in these Q&As.
You know, I'm fascinated by the spectrum of comments and responses. It's really kind of like this strange mix of a seedy bar, MIT, an Asperger's convention, and the weird side of the internet, all in one big knuckly place. What kinds of times did you? My fear would be that I would try to engage with every single comment, and clearly you sort of picked and chose. How did you kind of work that process?
Well, I didn't want to, I never in general engaged with anybody who was trying to be negative with me. I always assume that I don't want to say it's a goal. I try to have the lights on. So it's a foggy day outside and ships are trying to come to shore and they need a beacon or else they're going to crash into the banks of the river. So I'm just trying to have the lights on so the ships can come to shore. If I start engaging too much with any negative commenter or someone who's got a little too much emotional baggage against me, then that's going to be where the ship goes. And we're all going to crash together into the banks of the river and smash to smithereens, and that'll ruin the value for everybody of the entire thread. And I realized at some point there were tens of thousands of people. I mean, at any given second, there were 5,000 to 10,000 people on that thread, for 8 straight hours. So I wanted to keep the ship going smoothly, and so I only wanted to respond when it could be as positive as possible. And I don't mean optimistic, because we're not necessarily not everybody is in a situation where they should be, oh yeah, everything's great. But I wanted to be positive to show that there are answers for everybody if they take a positive approach.
Interesting. I mean, I read everything from some random person saying, you must have had a cocaine habit. After all you've been through, what's the big advice you'd give to young adults? And just seeing what came back or forth, it's fascinating. I don't know. Like there's one here, not to be rude or anything, but what are you worth currently? And I thought,
Yeah.
who would ask this? It's just mental. And of course you answered back infinite and zero,
Yeah, because again, so he's looking for something in a bank account. Now, anyone can Google me and see what I've done and what I haven't done and so on. But really, if I die tomorrow, it doesn't matter what I'm worth. What I'm worth is the value I'm bringing to the table right now, which is what I was saying in that Q&A. And it's funny, he asked the very same question my 11-year-old daughter asked me the day before. She doesn't necessarily need to know the answer to that either. She needs to know other answers. What she needs to know is that she's safe and secure, and right now she shouldn't worry about being homeless. That's what she's really asking. And so she doesn't know what a number is, or at least, with the difference between X or Y. So neither does this guy need to know. But he needs to know that it's possible to be safe and secure, and there's lots of different answers to his question that are acceptable.
Very true. That's a very sage way of putting it. Related to that, I'm not feeling especially sage. I'm feeling like I've had to get down in the trenches and fix a lot of broken things. And I feel like I'm a step or two above the parts in your books where you're laying on a floor just thinking maybe I should be dead right now. I'm above that, but not much above it, and I've got a lot of challenges ahead. I lose my ability to be sage when I'm in those challenge modes. I basically get down to shovels and brown bag lunches and just do the damn work. What's that like for you?
Well, and I feel the same way almost every day. I mean, and I think everybody does, because it's sort of like we know that the world is difficult. We're always going to run into problems. Like, let's say you're financially successful, you might have a health issue. Or let's say you're healthy, you might have a relationship issue. Or you have a relationship issue, but you have money in the bank. So there's always something that's a problem. So what you just told me is you recognize that not only are you in some degree of pain, but you actually sort of know what the source of some of that pain is. So that's great. So you also know, just from your own experience, that there's a way right now, this second, there's a way to basically get out of that pain, which is to start fixing these different things. This all you could do right now is fix the different broken things if you find them and if they're fixable.
Sure.
And then finally, if you take a step back and say, okay, I find that I get a little too anxious during these days. What can I do in general to reduce my anxiety? I can stay fit, which you do. I saw your pictures on Facebook earlier. You go to the gym. I can sleep well. I could be around people I love, which you do. I saw your pictures earlier. I could keep coming up with ideas. I could keep feeling gratitude. So what I just described to you will be very familiar because I gave 4 things, which were practical explanations of Buddha's 4 noble truths, actually. So you were suffering, you found the causes of your suffering, you figured that there was a way out, and then you take a step back and you live a good life. So most people view his 4 truths as this very theoretical construct, and that's how in general, like people in that quote unquote religion should be. But actually, he wasn't talking about it in a theoretical way. He was talking about what you just said. Every day, I'm having a problem, and I need to know that there's a way out of my problem, and then I need to have a better way of dealing in general with my problems. So his advice was very practical, not theoretical, and most people don't think of it that way. And again, when I sort of recognize that I'm starting to suffer again, I try to switch it from the theoretical immediately to the practical. Okay, well, what can I do, and what can I do in general to decrease the amount of time that this suffering is occurring? He doesn't say that there's always suffering and that you have to suffer. He just says that there is suffering, and it's right now if you don't avoid it.
That is...
And I don't mean to be Buddhist because I'm actually not. I'm not a Buddhist because I don't believe in any religion.
Sure.
And I don't think Buddha was Buddhist.
Right.
You know, he was just giving practical advice for how to live in the jungle right now.
You know, that's where I was just now when we were talking, and you were saying this to me. I was just thinking, I just bet that in a lot of ways he was just a dude, like had a bunch of good ideas, and they were a lot more practical than they are now that they're like in golden scrolls and at restaurants. And yeah.
Buddha was screwed. He was in between 2 warring kingdoms, and he was the cousin of one of the kingdoms, and he had to keep alive somehow, even though they were all killing each other. So his entire life was spent in diplomacy, keeping a bunch of monks who didn't have any weapons alive. And so it was very practical, all of his advice, when you actually kind of read between the lines.
I love the storyline, James, because I think that so I converted to Buddhism, but what I say to people all the time is by convert, I practice the practice of it. I don't really care about all of the theology that came along with it, and I don't care about those elements of it. I practice Shambhala Buddhism, which is essentially just breathe a lot. Like that's all they really tell you to do. Everything else is just a little bit of an extension from that. And so it's very interesting that you related it to that. And then further, just to say, yeah, I'm not even Buddhist. It's just a good plan.
Well, you know, his teachings are in all sorts of religions, like Taoism, sure. You know, Christianity, Judaism. There's reflections of it everywhere. I just appreciate how he brought it right down to the practical. You know, but Lao Tzu brings it down to the practical as well. It's whatever meal you choose to eat that day. You know, they always say you don't want to eat the same food every day because no matter how healthy it is, even if you eat spinach every day, you'll get too much of one specific type of acid and you'll die. And so it's the same thing with spiritual beliefs almost. You almost want to be diverse a little bit just to make sure you don't get too much of one acidity and then die from it.
I support that. You know, speaking of which, I've had the same conversation 3 different ways recently. I have this weird thing going where I'm sort of thinking, how cool is this new pope? Like, when in the history of popes has that been like a conversation? But this guy seems pretty neat. And I don't mean that in any particular religious opinion, just that he seems to have his head screwed on pretty nicely.
Yeah, and of course, my wife is from Argentina, so,
oh, yeah.
You know, So now, they had a great soccer event with their big soccer player Maradona, where he supposedly had the hand of God, that the famous moment in soccer history. And so now actually there's proof that they have a whole man of God as opposed to the hand of God. So yeah, Pope Francis has been doing an interesting job. A lot of people like him and a lot of people hate him. But if you're doing something right, at least half the people will hate you.
That seems to be the golden rule. What do you think is on people's minds the most right now? Choose Yourself, by the way, now many months later is still just utterly applicable. I mean, everything in the book is something that somebody's facing every single day. A friend of mine just got laid off yesterday and was trying to circle the drain a little bit, and it's the right book for him. What's on people's minds? What's the sort of the zeitgeist that you see out there right now?
Well, what I'm seeing, and I've mentioned this before, I'm on the board of a staffing company that has about $1 billion in revenues. So I can't speak specifically about them because of my relationship with them, but I can speak about the staffing industry in general. And what's happening across the entire Fortune 500 is that, and so basically every company, is that they're essentially slowly firing everybody in the middle and replacing them or not replacing them with temp workers, with robots, or with people in other countries. For a lot of reasons. There's no politics either way. It's not for Democrat reasons. It's not for Republican reasons. It's because this is in general, the future has arrived. And this is where the future is going. And in general, you can't say, oh, well, I love my job, so I'm going to stay at my job. You might not have the choice. And so you need to, again, start to at least think about Plan B. This is the zeitgeist, which is that you need to choose yourself, because nobody else, your company, your family, your government, your school, nobody else is going to pay you back. No one else is going to choose you. You have to figure out the tools. And you've done this really well, Chris. You're all over the place. You're starting Owner Mag. You're working on other businesses. You've been doing this for a decade or more. This is what you have to do in general. This is what people have to learn how to do in general. Unfortunately. Now, the good news is we have more tools than ever to do it. So the internet has been a godsend coming out at the right time. Now is the time to really make use of it.
I agree. I just had the chance to reconnect with a fella. It's a funny story to me, just insofar as the last time I met this guy, Gautam Gupta, he was
from Google.
Nope, this one is a different Gautam Gupta.
Okay.
He's a young guy from Boston area. He was at I forget which VC firm in Boston, and I went in there and met him. And he was playing the role, in all VC firms, there's always the role of the kid. And the kid is the one who has to sniff things and go, yeah, this is pretty cool. And you have to get the kid on board so that the money guys think, oh, that seems good, right? So Gautam was the kid. So now he runs naturebox.com. Which is one of these, spend $20 a month and get a box full of great stuff. His is a little different insofar as he sort of sends over, I think he creates some of the foods that are in the box, some or all of the foods. But to your point, what did he do? He was working at a VC firm. He probably could have sat around and waited to try to be a partner, but he was the kid, not the guy who accidentally had $100 million to invest. So you know how that goes for a long time. And instead he decided, I think I'll make this company. And it's exciting. He moved out to San Francisco. It looks like he's doing well. He's been on all these crazy places like Rachel Ray and all that. But there you go. I mean, that's an example. He's chosen himself.
Yeah, and that's a great idea, and it's an idea that is replicable. Like, you could do that idea. For instance, many people would subscribe to see what's Chris Brogan's favorite books of the month, and you send just a care package of the books you're reading each month. Or another one, what's your favorite gadget of the quarter? So I'll subscribe annually, but every quarter I'm going to get your favorite new gadget that's like wild and wacky, like some crazy gadget. And stuff like that's interesting. And a lot of people could do that, and it's not that hard to do the SEO and to build the brand, where suddenly you have there's that Kevin Kelly blog post. It's very famous. If all you need is 1,000 true fans. So if you had 1,000 people subscribing to that type of thing, you can at the very least make a good living. Now then you can scale it further. You can have 100,000 people and you have a real wealthy business. But 1,000 people is what you need to live.
Yeah, I very much subscribe to that, James. It's how I've built my business. It's how all my courses are run, and we do a lot to really nurture the people that are inside of that community. So that's been a proven model for me. It's funny about when you say about what people will like or want or something like that. Sean Bonner, do you know Sean at all?
No.
Okay, so he's the kind of guy you kind of should know. I'll make that connection at some point. So he's out in LA somewhere. He's done a lot of weird jobs, like fun stuff. He was like he did some kind of weird job at Playboy.com for a while. That would have been like in the same time frame when you were building websites. But he gets to do cool stuff. So he has a setup over at Quarterly.co, which, by the way, is one of these gift box companies where it's kind of like the blurb for gift box companies. You set it up through them and you make a bunch of these packages and they handle all the details. And so his one has like his last package, I guess, had a whole thing about how to make the Chemex coffee, that coffee that people do now with the pour over and all that. And then
interesting.
The one before that was like a flashlight, some kind of weird USB drive, a weird brass puzzle, and some other weird trinkety things. And to your point, it's those things. It's crazy things that people find interesting in the mail. So to your point, a lot of these ideas. I love this. You said this in the Reddit thing. You said there's not only one millionaire in the world. Copy.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of business models that can be copied to actually give people not necessarily billion-dollar success. That's relatively rare, but to be successful and wealthy. A job won't ever make you wealthy unless you're the CEO of a Fortune 100 company.
Right.
There's going to be too much in taxes. There's going to be too much of your time taken away from you, so you can't work on anything else. But if you're just successful at building up bit by bit these diverse pieces of income, you're going to do well. For instance, again, take this quarterly idea or anything. Start with your parents. Start with your friends. Start with your family. Start with your Facebook friends. Suddenly, that's an easy 100. Now you start to branch out from that. Word of mouth spreads out. You'll get your 1,000. Maybe it takes a year. Maybe it takes 2 years, 3 years. But then you're off to the races. You don't and you can have a full-time job at the same time.
So a million years ago,
suddenly now you have 2 streams of income.
Right, and then you're off to the races. It's funny as you were saying this because I started thinking a million years ago. I listened to Jason Calacanis on a podcast, and I know this might startle you, but he said something partly offensive and partly jarring that made people take notice. He said something like. And nobody cared during the podcast because I think they all agreed with him. He said something like, once you figure out how to make $1 million one time, you can make $1 million 100 times. You could do it over and over again just to the 1 million mark. And then you might figure out 5 million and then 10. And then suddenly it's really hard to figure out how to make 100. What's your take on that?
Because 100 million is hard because that's like lucky money. You have to sort of hit yourself to something that the world is going to fancy, the entire world is going to fancy for a while. And it may work and it may not work. But $1 million means selling, a $10 product 100,000 times, or a $100 product 10,000 times, or, building something, selling services to 10 different companies, and then selling your business for $1 million. So He's right in that sense. I'll tell you a conversation I had with Jason Calacanis in 1996. I was one of the first advertisers in Silicon Valley, and that was his first magazine. And I sat down with him, and he was telling me about every company, all of my competitors, and I said, "Man, Jason, you should work for a venture capitalist. You know everything." And he said, "No, I don't want to invest in other companies." And I'm like, "Why not?" And he said, "Because the best return on my money is if I invest in myself." And he was right. So now he invests in other companies, but for a long time, he just invested in himself, and that worked out for him. And it was good advice. Investing in yourself is by far the highest returns you can ever get.
I can't disagree with it. It's one of those things that, when I first ever came into my first small amount of money that I could do something with, and I mean less than 100 grand, and I was thinking, what can I do with this? I really had these ideas that I would seed invest all of it, which means what? 4 investments if I'm lucky. If I had done it, which I did not, I would have lost it all. And instead, I invested it in a whole bunch of business ideas and lost it all. but it were all
Yes.
my ideas and they were all my horses to lose. And I felt a lot less miserable because every time I lost the money, I could only blame one guy. So
Well, it's funny because when I sold my first business and I had all this money, I did invest it all and I did lose it all, and it felt horrible. Like it was the worst feeling ever. I lost millions of dollars and I could have killed myself. Like it felt so bad. Go back 3 or 4 years, I made my first amount of money. I had $0 in the bank. This is 3 or 4 years before I sold my company. And I sold one website design where I made $17,500 cash. Cash. Because it was some Russian Israeli diamond dealer. And I walked over to the Chelsea Hotel. I had no place to live. I walked over to the Chelsea Hotel with all this cash, and I just gave it to the manager, famous guy, Stanley Bard, because he managed the Chelsea Hotel for 50 years. And I just plopped it down on his desk, and I said, I need a room to stay in. And he's like, what are you, some kind of drug dealer? And I'm like, no, I'm a website designer. And, you know, it didn't quite have the same sort of coolness, but I felt so good making that cash. But then when I had 10, 15 million, it wasn't enough. And so I had to lose it all. When something is not enough, you lose it all. When something is enough, you make much more.
yeah, that was again something fun in the Reddit. I mean, really, ultimately, you basically gave a very fast crash course in a lot of business making in that experience. I have this thing where, so for instance, people will ask me about my fitness and health, and they'll say, so what did you do? And I'll explain it, and it's really basic. It's everything everyone hates to do. I do the work, and I eat better things. And they're always like, oh, okay. And I know 90+% of them aren't going to do anything. And yet I feel compelled to tell the story because I've been asked to tell the story. How do you equate to that at all in your business? Do you relate to that and when you tell people your business?
Oh yeah. Well, I'll give you a similar example. So, you know, I always describe this daily practice, come up with, you know, we talked about it before, but one of the things is, you know, come up with ideas every day and exercise the idea muscle. So one guy wrote to me and said, listen, I've been following your daily practice. I've been physically healthy, doing all this, and I've been writing 10 ideas a day. And then I've been going out on Friday night and hanging out and drinking with my friends, and they all laugh at all my ideas. And then I feel really bad afterwards. What should I do? And I said, well, I have a very simple solution for you, which is stay home on Friday nights.
Yeah.
Like, don't go out anymore on Friday night. And I never heard from him again because people in general, you cannot give advice to people. They don't really want to follow advice. So all you can really do is plant seeds. So maybe 5 years from now, that guy is going to say, you know, James might have been right not to go out Friday nights. I'm not going to go out Friday nights anymore. And so I planted a seed. Whether it blossoms or not, who knows? But that's the same thing every day. Like nobody really wants advice. They just want to express their fears and concerns. The real issue is, can they take a step back and reduce the amount of time that they're afraid or regret or feel guilty and get back to, you know, how they can just move forward right now.
You know, I read the strangest article that relates to this. It was just a brief, you know, one of those horrendous pseudoscience ones where they say, this study said this. And it could be a total baloney unless you really read the study, it turns out. But the study said that Israeli, I think it was Israeli special forces or something, were much better at being elite athletes because it turned out that they weren't afraid of the pain associated with getting through the bad times or whatever. Like that sort of wall you have to push through to become, you know, better at whatever you're going to do. Evidently, it was fear related. It was 100% that they had less fear than any other group of people that was studied in this study. And I thought, what a strange reality that it's not that they're physically they have more physical prowess. It's all that they faced fear in a better way.
Well, you know, there's a saying, time heals all wounds, but nobody tells us how much time it takes. And for each person, it's different. And so it's really like everybody feels fear. If a lion is chasing you, you have to feel fear. But, you know, how fast you move, you know, crush that fear in so you can take action, which is running, you know, will save your life. So everything is a matter of how do I increase the amount of time or decrease the amount of time I am time traveling. I'm stuck with the fear, or I'm feeling anxious about the future, or I'm feeling bad about the past. So avoiding the time traveling so I can take action now, which is run. So, or do whatever Israeli athletes do.
Yeah, I mean, everybody Everybody's trying to invent time traveling, and you're trying to take it away from the world, James. I think it's
Yeah.
probably better.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, listen, I'm quitting, but we can go to jamesaltucher.com. We can read the best thing out on the internet, Altucher
Or
Confidential.
ownermag.com.
Yeah,
So
we can do
that's
that.
you can find my articles there.
Yeah, my favorite. And hey, I haven't received an angry letter in a while. We might have to really push up the
I
volume.
know I toned it down since September. I really got some people angry.
That was
So
fun, though, you know, in hindsight. But it was only also because I didn't have the software set up to actually write the author's name. And I think they were doubly frustrated by thinking it was my take on things. And I've never heard you speak that way before. And I said, that's because I'm not James.
no, I think they were projecting onto you because it was your site, and so I got very nervous for you. I didn't want you to have a problem because I was going to take down the article, but then you said,
No
you
way.
know, just keep it up there.
Well, and now you have the opportunity to read the December article, which is how to get 10 million users to your website, which has 28 comments the last I looked. So absolutely astounding work. Thanks for your time
Thank
today.
you. Yeah, thanks, Chris. We should do this more.
We should for sure.